At 5-2, the Seahawks are tied for the most wins in the NFC, but it remains to be seen whether they are a true contender. We're going to be breaking down some moves at the deadline that could be made for Mike Macdonald's squad to truly put him in that upper hierarchy heading towards the second half of the season. Coming up next here on our Thursday edition of Locked On Seahawks.
You are Locked On Seahawks, your daily Seattle Seahawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Greetings, 12. This is Corbin Smith, host of the Locked On Seahawks podcast, your daily Seahawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. A special thanks to each and every one of the 12s tuning in, whether you are down in Malibu, California, or you are listening across the country in Tallahassee, Florida. A special thanks to each and every one of you. And as always, I'm glad to be joined by my co-host in crime, Rob Rang, as we dive more into the trade deadline. Look, it's getting close. November 4th is going to be here before you know it. And John Schneider, historically, if the Seahawks have had a bye week around the deadline, this has been a time where he's been pretty active. So we are going to be looking into some moves the Seahawks could make that truly could catapult them into contender status in the NFC. And then we've got bye week report cards on the defensive side of the football, defensive line, edge rushers, linebackers, corner safeties. We've got them all covered on this episode, brought your way by friends at Prize Picks. Download the Prize Picks app today and use the code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. Now for your lead story here on our Thursday edition of Locked On Seahawks. With 5 wins in their last 6 games and a 5-2 record overall, the Seahawks are tied for the most wins in the NFC. But it depends who you listen to, whether this team is a contender or not. It still seems to be very much up in the air in terms of where they fit in the NFC hierarchy, with teams like the Bucs and the Eagles and the Packers, who currently would have the number 1 seed. Even though they only have 4 wins, they only have 1 loss and they have a tie. So they are in that number 1 spot right now. Rob, because of all of that clutter atop the NFC standings, where you have so many teams with 5 wins, you've got a 4-1-1 team, there's still a lot of questions about who the real contenders are, including with the Seahawks, who, as Mike Macdonald said, have not played a complete game to this point. So there's some murkiness there for a lot of the national experts. And I think you and I are in agreement that this team, maybe we're not quite sold as there yet to be in that upper echelon, but a move or two could get them there. So with the November 4th deadline coming up, let's talk about the weakest links on this roster, the areas the Seahawks could upgrade, and who we think would, at that position, vault them into contention. And so I'm going to give you the mic first. What position to you is the biggest need for the Seahawks heading into this November 4th deadline that could really swing this team into that upper level of contenders in the NFC?
Well, I think anybody who's watched the Seahawks' inability to consistently run the football, I think is obviously going to gravitate towards the offensive line. That said, looking at the landscape out there, Corbin, I just don't see a lot of quality interior offensive linemen that I think are going to be able to move the needle for the Seahawks. And so the player that I'm going to mention here in terms of the interior of the offensive line is not going to be a household name. He certainly is not going to be somebody I think that would, vault the Seahawks into being a Super Bowl favorite, at least according to the national media out there, as much as maybe one of the edge rushers or one of the cornerbacks or one of the wide receivers, another position group that I think is a significant area of concern. But with all that said, I do think that right guard remains a huge area of concern for this club. I do think the healthy return to Christian Haynes and Josh Jones could, the Seahawks may not need to do anything. But if they are going to make a trade, then I would not be surprised at all if they went to a team that John Benton and Rick Dennison as offensive line coaches, that they're going to have a great deal of familiar with, having worked in the NFC South with the New Orleans Saints all those years. The Carolina Panthers, of course, are a team in that division that the Seahawks know well. Dan Morgan is the general manager. former Seahawks scout. Dave Canales is the head coach, and Austin Corbett, who has some center guard versatility. I think that he has the mobility and the versatility that would be able to make a quality fit. He probably would cost a day 3 selection, something that John Schneider has done many times in the past.
Yeah, I'm going to stick with the offensive line, number one for me too. And we've talked about Bradford's struggles here the last couple games and the regression that we have seen in the field, unfortunately. But for me, I'm staying with a team that the coaching staff is not just familiar with. They've coached the guys. To me, New Orleans is already putting up fire sale signs. It has been out there. Cesar Ruiz is under club control for a couple more years. The Seahawks can absorb his salary cap hit. And I look at what he did last year. It was his best season in the NFL by a wide margin because I just think this scheme is the perfect fit for his athleticism. And to me, he is a significant upgrade in this scheme over Anthony Bradford and his guy, John Benton and Clint Kubiak would both vouch for. So to me, Cesar Ruiz, we've talked Wyatt Teller too. I think he makes some sense. But to me, Ruiz is the guy with the upside and the youth that I think could really push that needle for this offensive line. It feels like it's one piece away from being a top 10 potentially caliber offensive line, and they just got one spot that's holding them back right now. Edge rusher comes in at number 2 for me on this list, and we've talked a lot about players here. As far as who's going to move the needle the most, I know our listeners want me to say Max Crosby. The Raiders are not trading Max Crosby. He's not moving. I think that smoke screen out there is legitimate. I don't think they're going to be moving him, and the cost would be incredibly high. Trey Hendrickson's probably not going at this point because the Bengals are still in it. Kayvon Thibodeau is the name that I've been throwing out there. He's 24, not quite 25 years old. He's had a double-digit sack season before. Brian Burns and Carter are both there at the edge position for the Giants. I think you can get him for a day 2, maybe even an early day 3 pick at this point. The Giants are going to be looking for more picks to continue their rebuild of that roster. And I don't know that Kayvon Thibodeau is part of their future. I think in Seattle, though, coming back to Pacific Northwest, they're playing at Oregon. I think he would make so much sense for this defense.
There's a lot of things you just said there that I 100% agree with. Kayvon Thibodeau, I just love his physicality. I think that he would be a hand-in-glove kind of fit in Mike McDonald's defense. I just already think that Seattle is very physical. I want more speed off the edge. I want more finish off the edge. And so I'm actually going to stay in roughly the same stadium, MetLife Stadium, and go with the New York Jets' Will McDonald the 4th. To me, he is one of the smoothest pass rushers in the league. I know the statistics aren't out there, but the game tape shows that his initial burst and his bend off the corner, I think it would give Seahawks something that they don't already possess, a pass rusher that can finish.
Yeah, let's go to the secondary real quick. At least for me, number 3 on my list, cornerback. And some of it's been depth. Some of it's been the rumors about Riq Woolen. And we've talked about this ad nauseum. I just don't know that Riq Woolen fits what Mike McDonald is wanting at the outside cornerback position near as well as what he did in Pete Carroll's defense. And I just think at this point, those rumors, that does feel like there's some teeth to it. I'm wondering if we could see a corner swap where Riq Woolen goes to Baltimore and Marlon Humphrey comes to Seattle. I still think Marlon Humphrey is a extremely talented corner, and he had some of his best years playing in Mike McDonald's defense. I think you put him with this team, the talent Seattle's already got, that Marlon Humphrey is going to rebound back to the guy that last year had 6 picks and 10 pass breakups. He's still a very good player, and he'll come up and stick you in the run game too. He can play the zone and man coverage stuff. He can press. I just think that would be a phenomenal fit for the Seattle Seahawks and for Marlon Humphrey.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think on both points. One, I think that Riq Woolen is potentially on the trade block for Seattle because he is not the clean fit in Mike McDonald's defense. Now, again, that the scout in me absolutely is in love with Riq Woolen's ceiling. And so I would be really hesitant to trade him. But at the same time, his up and down nature in which he plays is so frustrating that I could see Seattle looking to move him perhaps for a corner swap. One of the players that I'm intrigued by is Roger McCreary from the Tennessee Titans, former first round selection, the same type of versatility that you mentioned before and correctly with Marlon Humphrey. I see that with a younger player in Roger McCreary. I like the physicality. I like the ability to play inside and out. He's not a big interception guy, but frankly, neither is Josh Jobe, or Artie Burns or any other corners that we have seen be successful here in the last couple of years. It's kind of reclamation projects for the Seahawks.
And real quick, let's talk wild card positions, maybe spots that aren't being talked about. And I know for you, it's wide receiver. For me, I'm actually going to put center here. And this is not that I think Jalen Sundell has been bad. Quite the contrary. I think he's been a middle-of-the-pack center, which compared to the last 10 years, most of the last 10 years, that's an upgrade. But I think there might be a name out there that is available that isn't even playing center right now, and he should be. In Las Vegas, you've got the connection with Pete Carroll. Jackson Powers-Johnson, formerly of Oregon. I loved him coming out of the draft. I think that this kid goes back to center in this scheme with his athleticism and his nastiness. I think he'd be a great fit. And I think he needs a clean change of scenery too, because he's upset he's not playing center. And I don't blame him because I think that is his best position. So I'd be calling up Pete and company saying, hey, we're not trying to get Max Crosby, but Jackson Powers-Johnson comes in. You could even slide Sundell to right guard if you wanted, and I could see that being a good fit for Seattle at both those positions.
Or you could just keep JPJ at the right guard position, and so again, it can kind of fill both needs here for Seattle. So again, another one that makes an awful lot of sense. I'm going to go with, as you said, a wide receiver. To me, remains a position of concern for the Seahawks because, God forbid, if JSN goes down, what do you do then? And that's one of the things that spooks me a little bit is just anytime you have one positional group that is as critical as to success in today's modern NFL as wide receiver, and you basically have one superstar, and then look, with all due respect to Cooper Kupp, a quality football player that you mentioned some really good points in yesterday's show about what he brings to the table as a run blocker. But obviously with only one touchdown reception so far, with Torrey Horton as dynamic as he has been, with 9 catches in 7 games, albeit 3 of them going for scores, and the fact that he went down with what looked to be an ankle injury late in the victory over the Houston Texans, that makes me a little nervous. So wide receiver remains a position of concern for me, at least. I've been saying this. I worry about Seattle's lack of deep speed. So if you really are going to swing for the fences, there's a Miami Dolphins team out there that could be on the verge of a fire sale. Bring in a guy like a Jalen Waddle and let Sam Darnold show off that deep ball accuracy that we've seen so many flashes of already this season.
Waddle and Smith and Jigba in the same receiving core with Cooper. I could see that happening and be okay with it, but you would have to pay a significant price there too. It would be an expensive trade. So that's a possibility if Seattle's going to be looking at wide receiver. When we come back, we got our offensive report cards of the bye yesterday. We're going to dive into the defensive groups, and we're going to start off in the trenches today. Defensive tackles and the edge defenders. That'll be coming up next here on our Thursday edition of Locked On Seahawks. This episode is brought your way by Prize Picks, the daily fantasy app where making the right call can actually pay off. You and I make decisions every day, but on Prize Picks, being right means you get to cash in. With football season well underway, Prize Picks is the simplest and fastest way to get in on the action. Just pick more or less on 2 to 6 player projections, and you can turn your takes into real prizes all in less than 60 seconds. I've been playing Prize Picks lately, and it's such a fun way to stay locked in for the season. It's quick, easy, and honestly my favorite way to follow along with football. I love checking projections like Mac Jones for more or less than 250 passing yards, or Christian McCaffrey for more or less than 1 rushing touchdown. Download the Prize Picks app today and use the code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 in the lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's Locked On NFL for $50 in lineups after your first $5 play. Prize Picks, it's good to be right. The NFL season is officially in week 8. There's nothing better than being in the stadium surrounded by fans cheering on your team. But let's be real, getting tickets can be an absolute pain, whether it's login screens, prices jumping at checkout. It can be a really frustrating process. And that's why I use Game Time, the app that gives the advantage back to us fans. Game Time is fast, easy, and backed by the Game Time guarantee. You'll always get 100% authentic tickets delivered on time and at the best price. Plus, all the fees are included. So the price you see is the price you pay. I pull up on Game Time in just a couple taps. I get amazing deals. I'm talking your favorite NFL games as low as $100. The app made it simple. I could even see the exact view from my seat before buying. And with zone deals, you get to pick the section and Game Time picks the seats. You save big. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's the promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go download Game Time today. Welcome back to the Thursday edition of Locked On Seahawks. I'm your host, Corbin Smith. He's Rob Rang. A special thanks to all the 12s who are tuning in. And thank you, as always, for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. We greatly appreciate it. We are in the bye week for the Seahawks, week 8. No game coming up this weekend. No stress for Seahawks fans. And as we do every year on the bye week, it's time for our position-by-position report cards. And we are going to dig into the trenches on defense to start things off. And we'll start at the defensive tackle position, which had incredibly high expectations going into this season. And Rob, I think with the exception of the Tampa Bay game, which obviously the entire defensive line just went AWOL that game for whatever reason, they just didn't perform in that game. But you take that game out of the equation, this has been as dominant of an interior defensive line as you are going to see in the NFL. Because they had that one slip up, I can't give them an A, but I think an A- is the sweet spot here. Leonard Williams, maybe the sacks aren't there, but the disruptive plays still are. He is killing teams, and he is winning against double teams. He's opening things up for the rest of the defense. Byron Murphy, one of the league leaders for defensive tackles and sacks. He's having a phenomenal sophomore season. Jaron Reed continues to be incredibly consistent, and Brandon Peely's given them a lot of good snaps. Mike Morris has played well when he's had his opportunities. So I'm going to give an A-. I can't give the A just because that Tampa Bay game still kind of irks me a little bit. But every other game, this group has been dominant, and they've really set the tone for a top 5 scoring defense.
Yeah, I did give him the A, and you're almost convinced me there as to why to give him the A-, because, yeah, that loss to Tampa Bay where Seattle's inability to create any kind of consistent pressure was maddening. But at the same time, this defensive line has been absolutely dominant. They are first in the NFL in allowing only 2 rushing touchdowns so far this season. They are first in the NFL with only allowing 530 rushing yards through 7 games. And again, you can give a lot of credit to the safeties, certainly a lot of credit to the linebackers, but I think it all starts up front. I love the fact that you mentioned each of the players by name. I think that Leonard Williams continues to be, just like he was a year ago, a legitimate defensive player of the year candidate. Byron Murphy II's emergence this year, to me, is probably every bit as big in a real football sense as Jackson Smith-Njigba's emergence on the offensive side of the ball. Obviously, he's not going to get that same type of buzz. No defensive lineman is ever going to get the attention of a playmaking wide receiver. But at the same time, Byron Murphy II has been spectacular. And then Jaron Reed is just as reliable as it gets, And so if you, to mention a guy like a Brandon Peely or a Mike Morris, the fact that they are contributing significant minutes, significant play, despite kind of playing off the bench, I think, again, just kind of is a testament to the depth and the talent of this front. In my opinion, this is Seattle's best positional group by far.
And as far as the other position along the defensive line, the edge outside linebacker spot, this was another group that I had incredibly high expectations for going into the season, especially after adding DeMarcus Lawrence. And look, I think on one hand, I think DeMarcus Lawrence has been an A or A- at worst. He has been a game wrecker. He's been everything the Seahawks could have asked for and more. He's getting sacks. We saw what him not being in the lineup looked like in that Tampa Bay game. That was maybe the biggest reason that the entire rest of the D-line just kind of fell flat. He has been that important to the continuity up front, the leadership, the physicality, the toughness, and he's been extremely productive as a pass rusher and a run defender. And Uchenna Nwosu, don't look now, but these last 3 or 4 games, he is becoming a thorn in opposing teams' side as a pass rusher. The sack numbers are now showing up. The QB hits, the pressures he's had a few times he's missed, so those numbers could be even better. Those 2 guys have been really good. My issue has been Boye Mafe is probably playing better than the stats indicate. I went back and watched the All-22 for Monday. It's like, okay, he was productive and he had a strip sack taken away from a penalty, but I'm still not seeing enough. Like there just hasn't been enough production there from him. And Derek Hall, with the injury now. He didn't have any sacks before then. There's been some flashes, but to me, maybe I'm being too harsh here. I'm going to give this group a B- just because I'm not seeing enough collectively from this group for where my expectations were at. DeMarcus Lawrence has been fantastic. Uchenna Nwosu is doing a lot of good things, but I wanted to see more from Boye Mafe, and I wanted to see more from Derek Hall. This is a group that has a chance in the second half to be absolutely dynamic, but this is one of the reasons I've been talking about Kayvon Thibodeau and some of the other players, because it just feels like something is still not quite clicking for this group compared to what my expectations were.
Yeah, and that's I love the fact that you just mentioned the expectations, because I always feel like that's something we have to kind of try to absorb and try to recognize here. I also gave them a B-, and I was leaning towards a C-, except for the fact that DeMarcus Lawrence has been that good when he's been on the field. Uchenna Nwosu has been that good when he's been on the field. But again, those expectations, I think a lot of Seahawks fans out there had huge expectations for Derek Hall, considering the 8 sacks he had a year ago. I certainly had huge expectations of Boye Mafe. He was my pick to lead the Seahawks in sacks this season. He's got 0. So obviously expectations, he is not come even close to them at this point. I do kind of struggle with that again, because expectations are not always reality. And as you said, when you watch the tape of Boye Mafe, he is getting pressure. He's just not finishing. But that's the thing, is it feels like the Seahawks need an edge rusher who can actually be a finisher. So that's why I'm sticking with that B- grade, the same grade that you just gave. But I do think that this is a positional group that there's so much meat still on the bone with this group. So I am encouraged by what we've seen from Uchenna Nwosu, who's 5.5 sacks right now, leads the Seahawks.
Yeah, and so I think it's truly a mixed bag there. And again, that's why I had a B-. I flirted with a C+ just because there has been, look, there are players that, their play on film exceeds what their stats look like. And I think there's been times with Boye Mafe that we have seen that. And he's, had some swatted passes. He was back in coverage, had a pass break at the other. It's not like he hasn't done anything. But gosh, the QB hits and the sack numbers, like those things just have not been there. And I know he's had a few taken away with penalties. That's been unfortunate for him. Again, it's about expectations. And I don't think I was the only one. You had higher expectations for him than what I did going into this contract year. So and I'm not blaming Jared Ivey because he's been inactive for a lot of games, but I thought that he was a guy that was going to get more opportunities, or maybe Connor O'Toole. The depth has not played out the way that I thought it was going to at that spot. It could still very well be a position that turns things around. But again, that's why you and I keep flirting with some of these edge rushing names at the trade deadline. And guys, look, DeMarcus Lawrence, when he was out, Tampa Bay found a way to run off edge in that game. Like, you'd like to have a 3 or 4 man edge group that you can trust everybody to play solid run defense. So I think that is still a position that John Schneider is probably calling about and just seeing what is out there right now for that reason. When we come back, we've got inside linebackers, corners, and safeties as we continue our defensive report card here during the Seahawks bye week. Don't go away. You're listening to the Thursday edition of Locked On Seahawks. Mazda crafts cars for those who choose to do more than simply move. They follow what moves them every time they drive, and that's what makes Mazda stand out. They go beyond safety, style, and performance to deliver a driving experience that feels alive with every detail. Just as an athlete focuses on those small details, Mazda does the same. From metallic accents to hand-stitched Napa leather, you can feel it the moment you get behind the wheel. The smooth handling, intuitive controls, and standard all-wheel drive in every crossover SUV. Whether it's a quick drive over to the practice field or a weekend road trip, Mazda makes even everyday drives feel special. It's the small details that make the big plays. And just like there's more to every player, there's more to a Mazda vehicle. Mazda, move and be moved. Welcome back to the Thursday edition of Locked On Seahawks. I'm your host, Corbin Smith. Glad to be joined, as always, by my co-host in crime, Rob Rang. And a special thanks to all the 12s tuning in. Thank you, as always, for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. We greatly appreciate it. Let's shift gears now as we continue our defensive report cards at the bye week, as we do each year. let's go to the skill positions. We've got inside linebacker, we've got corner, we've got safety. Let's go backwards here and start with the safety group. You want to talk about a group that had extremely high expectations with Nick Emmanwori joining, Coby Bryant, Julian Love, and the injuries they have had there. Emmanwori's missed 3 games. Love's missed 3 games. Bryant's been the only one that's been healthy. And because of that, some may say, well, with the guys being out of the lineup, they had 1 game where the secondary got torched. Hard to give this group a good grade. I'm giving them an absolute A because Tayakata has played really well for the most part. D'Anthony Bell's given them some solid reps in limited action. Nick Emmanwori's playing really good football since he came back from the ankle injury. He's been a difference maker. Coby Bryant's still doing Coby Bryant things, getting picks, making plays in the run game. That Tampa Bay game, you could blame the corners just as much as the safeties for some of those big plays. In fact, I would lean more towards the corners on that from what I saw in the film study. And these safeties are getting sacks. They're getting pass breakups. They're helping with their run defense. That's as good as anybody's in the National Football League. They haven't given up 90 rushing yards in any of their 6 games. And the safeties have been a big part of that. So this is a group that I'm absolutely giving an A because with circumstances, they've still lived up to those expectations for the most part with 4th and 5th stringers playing a bunch of snaps.
I think that's fair. I want to give them a B+, but I think you make a very strong argument. My bone to pick with this group is you kind of touched on. It's just the durability. I do think that there are more interceptions that could have been had if Julian Love is out there. And I don't just mean by the safeties, but by the corners as well. I think that Seattle's defense is tighter. Look, Coby Bryant has been absolutely terrific in terms of the box score. I mean, you look at the 4 tackles for loss, 34 tackles overall. That's second on the team. 2 interceptions, a fumble recovery. He also is leading the team in missed tackles. And Mike McDonald kind of acknowledged as much earlier this season. So I do think that there is something to be said for that. As you said about Tayakata, he is just playing very clean, quality, reliable, consistent football. And so I've been very pleased with Tayakata. Wasn't necessarily surprised by it. That's all he's always done. He just needed his opportunities. And so I've been a Tayakata fan for a long time, been a big D'Anthony Bell fan for a long time. So not at all surprised by what he has done. And then, oh my goodness, what Nick Emmanwori has brought to this club over the last couple of weeks is, to me, the most exciting thing. So, Corbin, you almost have me convinced to move it into the A grade. This is the highest grade I gave any positional group other than defensive line, which I mentioned before. I gave an A. I do think that this group is, again, one of the absolute strengths of this roster and one of the best safety groups in all of the league.
Shifting over to the cornerback group, there's going to be some of our listeners that are going to be like, I've got a bone to pick with you, Corbin. Like, why are you going that low? I'm giving a C-, and let me explain why I'm going that low. Josh Jobe has played really well for the most part, but the last few weeks, there's been dropped interceptions. There was that gaffe against the Jaguars that gave them a gifted touchdown where he was in position and he just mistimed it. There's been a few more missed tackles from him. I still think generally Josh Jobe has played at a really high level this year. You've had the frustrations, though, with Reek Woolen, the inconsistencies. He doesn't have an interception yet. You lost the 49ers game in large part because of mistakes. Like, look, it's a team game, but he made 2 huge mistakes there at the end of that game. And a couple of the penalties had in Arizona allowed the Cardinals to get back and make that game interesting. He has had some huge mistakes this year. The tackling still remains an issue. And then you consider that Devin Witherspoon has been out most of the year. And when he came back for that second game, he wasn't right in that Cardinals game. He's clearly not healthy. He did not play to the level we expected to see. This is a lot about expectations. Nehemiah Pritchett looked terrible out there when he had his opportunity. And I was pushing for him to get a chance because he looked good in the preseason and training camp. That is why I've been arguing for Marlon Humphrey, because I just feel like that group, as good as I thought it was going to be. I mean, Shaquille Griffin can give you some snaps, but he's not a starter at this point. This position has been largely a big disappointment to me, and I expected it to be a strength. I still could see this group turning around, but I barely can give it a passing grade because of the missed tackles, the lack of interceptions, the lack of impact plays, and the impact plays that were there that they failed to capitalize on. A lot of dropped interceptions, the inconsistency, just some huge plays that this group was responsible for giving up. I can't give them higher than a C minus.
No, I ended up giving them a C. And so I'm thinking very similarly as you. Honestly, one of the reasons why I did give them the C was that the one corner that has actually had at least a little bit of playing time that you didn't mention there being Darian Kendrick and a couple of the big plays in which he did make. But that has been the exception rather than the norm for this group. To your point, I mean, Tariq Woolen having 0 interceptions after tying for the NFL lead as a rookie. Again, we're getting to that point of expectations. I think a lot of Seahawks fans were having pretty high expectations of Josh Jobe with the return to the Seahawks, and perhaps that's unfair. But the reality is the ball has hit him in the hands now. He leads the Seahawks with 6 passes broken up, but it makes you wonder, how many of those could have been interceptions for him. So again, I think that it's fair to be expecting a lot more from this group. And with Devin Witherspoon, I mean, my goodness, you consider some of the talented football players that the Seahawks could have taken, and instead went with an undersized corner who, when he's on the field, there's no doubt that he can be a difference maker. But the reality is he's played in 2 games so far this season. And in that second game against the Arizona Cardinals, as you pointed out, he struggled. He gave up both touchdowns in that football game. So again, I think that it is important that this Seahawks cornerback room improve mightily. Otherwise, this would not surprise me at all if this is the positional group that John Schneider is most looking to address when that November 4th trade deadline hits.
Now we're going to go to the one that I thought on offense and defense was the most fascinating for me to grade, and that was the inside linebacker position, because early in the year, Tyrese Knight, I went back and watched a lot of the game film. I don't think Tyrese Knight was playing bad football. I just want to put that out there. I don't think he was playing poor football. He was not playing as well as he played last year, and there was some hesitancy to his game coming off of a camp in preseason where he missed almost everything. And so I thought a lot of it was rust. And then Drake Thomas comes in and he's gradually taking playing time away. And then these last 2 games, Drake Thomas has just been absolutely outstanding. I mean, Drake Thomas was playing like a Pro Bowler these last 2 weeks. He is doing everything for Seattle's defense, but it's a 2-game sample size. Ernest Jones has been outstanding most games this year. I thought he was pressing some in that Tampa game with some of the injuries they had around him. You could say almost everybody played bad on defense that game. But he's got 3 interceptions already. He's getting involved in their pass rush as a blitzer. He's been effective. He's forcing backward passes. He's forcing fumbles. He's making all these big plays in the run game. He's a huge reason that this is the number 1 run defense in the NFL by most metrics. Ernest Jones is a big part of that. I decided to go with a solid B, but I was almost leaning to a B+ with the way Drake Thomas has played these last few weeks, and the fact that I think Ernest Jones has been a borderline all-pro player at that off-ball linebacker position. But I'm going to go a B just because the sample size of Drake Thomas is still relatively small playing at this level, and he had his struggles early in the year, and Tyrese Knight not living up to expectations that we had going into this year as well. But I still got to give a B because the 2 guys that are in the lineup are playing really good football right now.
Yeah, it's funny. I wound up giving the Seahawks a B as well. And it's interesting because, of the 12 different positional groups that we talked about, I think that's only our 2nd or 3rd time that we actually gave the same grade. So while we are thinking close to the same, certainly not identical here, but I am thinking very much along the same lines as you when it comes to this linebacker position. I think that Ernest Jones has been everything that the Seahawks were hoping that he would be when they made that big move to get him in the first place. And then Drake Thomas's emergence here over the last couple of weeks has been right there with Nick Eamon-Warry as far as on the defensive side of the ball, as far as being one of the real pleasant surprises. And I was a huge Drake Thomas fan in NC State. I mean, the guy is just oh my goodness, he's just an absolute hornet out there on the field. I mean, he's undersized, but he just buzzes around everywhere, and he brings a sting with him. I just love the plays that he is making in coverage. 3 passes broken up against the Houston Texans. You mentioned the big play ability in coverage from Ernest Jones as well. 3 interceptions, 5 passes broken up. I mean, his 59 tackles are almost double what anybody else has on the squad, that being, again, Kobe Bryant, as I mentioned before. So again, Seattle's two primary starting inside linebackers have been terrific so far this season. I would like to see a little bit more from Tyrese Knight when he is back on the field. I've been encouraged by what I've seen mostly on special teams with like Surratt and some of Seattle's other linebackers that they have on the field. So, encouraged. At the same time, I think that very clearly Seattle has two guys now at the inside linebacker position that are the guys for Mike McDonald's defense. And so, again, that is one of the biggest storylines is the fact that, again, after at least week 7, the Seahawks are number 1 in the league against the run. You consider how bad they were at times over the last 2, 3, 4 seasons against the run. That to me explains as much of why they are now 5-2 with no team in the NFC having a better record, at least in terms of wins, than the Seahawks. I think that's one of the biggest reasons for it.
As always, you can follow me on X and Blue Sky at Corbin Smith NFL. You can follow Rob at Rob Rang. Make sure to subscribe to Locked On Seahawks on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts to make sure you don't miss a single episode. Coming up tomorrow, we'll have our Blue Friday show, our bye-week Blue Friday show. Nick Lee and I are going to have some fun with a couple of games looking back at the first 7 contests for the Seahawks. It's going to be a lot of fun. So make sure that you listen in. Enjoy the rest of your Thursday. And thanks for tuning into this show. Go Hawks.